Welcome, everyone, to another very special episode of Enlightened Masculinity. I'm joined with my co-host, Akashanti Katakam, and we're here to talk about spiritual man, spiritual masculinity. Even my girlfriend was just sending me a video of some of her coworkers sent her something about, toxic masculinity. It was like some Gillette commercial and all of these situations, different circumstances through life with boys, like kids, if your child is a boy, different men approaching women was part of the thing. Shaming women, so a bunch of things. Some of them I agreed with, like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. And some of them were just like kind of scratching my head. I don't know what they're trying to get at. And others were like, that's really bad. If men were convinced to do that, then in 20 years, society's going to be extinct. Like, you can't have a man will not protect you if he never learned how to roughhouse as a boy. He's not going to know how to step in if somebody is bullying you if he didn't roughhouse as a boy. And I see it. I see boys that are like 11 to 18 years old. They're not boys yet. They still haven't matured into a boy. And then I see these guys that are like 18 to 25 or so, and they're like teenagers. Like their development is stunted and then they get in the real world and realize that, the political correctness that was given to, or kind of pushed on them as an adolescent, that the real world doesn't act like that. Even those same people that were pushing those ideas on them as children, in the real world will treat them harshly if they don't step up, if they're not leader-like, if they don't ignore their emotions that say, no, don't do that, I don't feel comfortable, and they do it anyway. And in certain situations, of course, you grab something I say, take it out of context and extrapolate it, and then all of a sudden I'm an evil person. But there's an important reason why men don't hear the word no very easy. That no does not register very easily for a man, because if a man were hunting in tribal days and the weather were inclement and internally he heard no, you would still want him to go out on the hunt, regardless of his feelings didn't feel right and he was saying no to himself. You would want him to do that. And in life, I see it all the time with my girlfriend and with others, that when in the little hesitation, in the little moment of not stepping up, I see their attraction drop. It's not a conscious thing. They're not consciously like, oh, now I will lose 2 points of attraction for Chris. Like, it's just, you see it when in the moment where I don't step up because I had an internal no or an internal hesitation, and I see their attraction diminish, their brightness diminishes, that they start looking around for something else. It's just a genetic machine. That's what the genetic machine does. So that's where I'm coming to this with, is just interacting with her, driving back. We did an hour drive going somewhere. And so I'm really excited to talk about the subject. This is like a really great medium for us guys, two male yoga teachers in a very female-dominated industry, in a very feminist-dominated climate, cultural climate, to come together and just talk about these ideas and form a dialogue about it, and maybe come to some conclusions or some new understandings or some new questions that have yet to be asked, and really spread the message. Because every time I've said something like sexist or misogynistic, even slightly, on my social media, it has polarized my audience. There's a lot of hate that comes, but you guys, what you don't see is the 2 or 3 women every time behind the scenes that sends me a message that thanks me, that enjoy. Think of Shane Smith. We're here in IMC Nation. Shane Smith does this a lot, and he went through that phase. And so now he has a bunch of lovers. I mean, like, I don't know, like sexually, but like, the opposite of a hater, like people who love his posts. But in the beginning, he had lots of haters. And when you start making these posts, the haters are always so much louder. But behind the scenes, I'm getting messages from women that are like, thank you. This helps me with my son. I wish my husband's thought like this. I'm glad to hear this. Like, and you don't see that because those women don't want to publicly say it, because then the haters will attack them, and they don't want to be attacked. If you're attacking people, then you're losing in life. You're losing. The loser attacks. Winners are too busy winning. So that's my position. I want to hand it over to Akash. What's going on with you, brother? What's new? I was really fascinated by, you had these 2 notebooks last time that was like, when you go out in the field and you're asking a question, I was like, that's brilliant, man. I want to use that. So yeah, what's new with you?
Yeah, Chris, awesome. So many things came up just even in that brief little intro that you had. One was sharpness with time. And that's why today I want to keep it sharp. We'll probably end at 12:40. And in the sense of like making that decision, like split second, and really committing to something in the moment is a very attractive feature in a man. of just being very decisive, because women are very indecisive. They're presented with so many options. I mean, if you think of it from her perspective, like there's so many guys out there. How do I know which one to pick? How do I know which one's the right one in a lot of ways? And so it's interesting that for a man, it's like we have just as many options, but it's like we need to know exactly what we want when we want it and go for it. And that's like the real attractive part. So that was something that kind of came up to me. Another thing is, while I was writing up some notes yesterday, I usually go out because I like being surrounded by people when I'm thinking. It kind of, I don't know, the energy, there's a lot more creative energy to be able to tap into. And so I went to the bar, and I've cut alcohol this year. So I grabbed some seltzer with mint and lemon. And just as I'm going up, there's this girl there. She starts talking to me, and I had my eyeliner. As you know, I usually do my eyeliner in the eye of Ra. And I like to present myself as a pharaoh, because when I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh shit, I'm a pharaoh. I gotta keep with that persona. Nonetheless, I sit down, and she comes up to me, and she starts asking me questions. She's with her boyfriend, but they're not talking at all. And before I know it, she literally spends the next 2 hours just talking to me as if she's totally just mesmerized. And I said maybe like 10 minutes of speaking in those 2 hours. She was just totally pouring her soul out. And it was incredible of an experience, because a lot of the notes and the takeaways that we're going to go through today kind of is based on that. The other thing I've been working on this past week is Rising Suns. So this is a once every other week sunrise yoga club where we'll be hiking around the area and waking up at sunrise on Saturdays. So super excited to talk a little bit about that, and also going to infuse the art of sacred communication that Arash has been teaching us in some of those classes. So very excited about that. A lot of things going on today. What I wanted to do was, I know we talked a little bit about enlightened masculinity last time, but I really want to break down that word. And I know you are someone who's amazing with your phonetics, and I know you just came out with a product very recently that really breaks down words and is more conscious with communication. So I wanted to break down enlightened masculinity with you. What does enlightened mean first, and then what does masculinity mean second, and then the phrase together. So maybe you can speak on that a little bit. You're muted, brother.
It's all opinions here, talking about, what is enlightened. The idea being of transcending the animal body, the animal instincts, transcending the kind of push button stimulus response, knee jerk reactions to life, and a little bit more awareness, a little more, a lot more awareness, just more awareness, like not acting out of unawareness. And it's an amazing thing, because we're so often just unaware of where we're unaware. And so a person might think they're aware, and then a new unawareness gets brought to their awareness, and they become aware of where they were unaware. So enlightenment just keeps happening. And all I can really say on that is that through my life and through my training, especially since getting into yoga, I realize now, being in yoga, that I was doing this before yoga, of seeking more and more masterful people. But when I got to yoga and I started reading the mythologies of like fully enlightened and fully realized people, it really set the standard high. I don't know if it's achievable, but it put my imagination on perfection. And then I started comparing everyone to perfection. And so it gave a much bigger measuring stick. And so on and on for years, I would find more and more enlightened and realized people leading up to Arash Dibazar, who's the most realized person that I've ever met in person. There are other people that have different qualities and different realization in certain niches, but I have yet to meet someone so fully embodying whatever it is that he's realized at. He fully embodies that and nothing else. And so you wouldn't even know his weaknesses, because he never goes there. It would be like a shark going into the jungle and then like being weak, or a lion swimming in the ocean. Like I never see Arash outside of the things, and yet I've also seen him in uncomfortable situations because they looked uncomfortable. He described them as uncomfortable, and how he handled that was so free. And anyway, so it just said that's the highest reference that I have for it. And
yeah, when I was looking into Enlightened yesterday and thinking through this, I mean, awareness, as you mentioned, is probably number one. Being aware of the unaware. I think you hit the nail on the head there. But also when you think of like enlightened, in light, right? So you're shining, you're bright. There's just, it's almost like a shimmering glow around. I know we usually break down the word, right? And
Yeah, the word magic of it, like to be enlightened, like inwardly lightened. So like
yeah,
light from the inside, it shines out. Because the what's hindering enlightenment is conditioning. And so you've been conditioned to not see your inner light. You've been, and which is mostly in your language. Language is what conditioned you. Language conditioned you away from just kind of animal freedom. But on, on the plus side, language is what gives you ethics. Without language, then you would be an animal also. So I think animals are quite enlightened. They're just unaware of their enlightenment. So they're in an unaware enlightened state. And most animals, you see animals now that are getting conditioned by language are getting conditioned. So dogs that are conditioned and have a vocabulary of like 10 or 12 words, or smart dogs have more. They might not be able to speak it because they don't have the voice machine to be able to do it. Some dogs do, right? You see those funny videos. But they just don't have the machinery to articulate the sounds. But they hear it and they understand. They respond to it. The sound, they're already getting coded by human words, which is conditioning them. And so your words, your sentences, your conditioning is like blinds, like these blinds behind me. They're blinds for the light. And when you just clear that, or if you don't move them aside, you just turn them so they're perfectly aligned, then maximum light comes through. And so a sense of glowing and enlightenment. And go ahead.
Masculinity then. I mean, let's break down the word magic of that. When I was reading up about masculinity, I mean, it was like saying like pertaining to the male sex, or it didn't really go into anything more. And I think that's kind of I mean, it's understood at a fundamental level, like, yeah, there's a woman, there's a man, and like there's slight differences between the two. As you talked about in the first, I think last week, there's very little difference between men and women, like very, very little, like compared to us with any other animal. Like we are the closest thing to each other because we're both humans. But perhaps you can go into the word magic of masculinity, or what you see in there.
Well, I'm looking up the etymology of it now, and I see, some from the 1300s referring to the grammatical, the male, and what is this? In the 12th century, the word origin is unknown, but meaning having an appropriate qualities of the male sex, physically or mentally, manly, virile, powerful, and then it goes on to some later definitions. What I know of language is that the vocabulary to describe men came before women. So the word for mother came much later than the word for father, like 1,000 years later. And the word for brother was 1,000 years. I'm making up that number. I don't know exactly what it is. You could go into like phonetics history, or, what do they call it? I forget what the discipline is called. But, just go into like linguistics and the evolution of language, and you'll see that the word brother came thousands of years before anybody ever had the word sister. And this probably has a lot to do with male dominance over the female, because women were owned. And you had to ask the woman's father for her hand in marriage because he owned her until you did. And when he agrees and you give the proper trade and you take the woman is now yours. And that's why she takes your name. And so the name of the woman was Mrs. Christovilbus. It's the Mrs. of Christovilbus. Like she's not that own entity. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying for evolution of the language, the words for females came much later. And so there's something to the potency of calling each other brother. Like, hey, brother. Like that word, you have evolved over the last maybe 200 generations of human to receive that word. Because even in Sanskrit and all Indo-European derivatives, the word is very similar for brother. It all starts with that BR kind of sound. And so your nervous system has evolved to respond to that, and that's pretty cool. So as far as masculinity, I think that's more of a kind of a modern idea. I don't know what the word magic would break down to. Masculinity, masculine, versus femme, mask. So it's like I don't know. I don't know what it would be. But
interesting. As I was looking through it yesterday, I mean, one of the words like was virile, right? It's kind of like seeking. I saw pursuer, kind of like chaser in some ways, explorer in a lot of ways as well. Because as you talked about it, it's not only in the physical traits, but it's in the mental. And I'd say it's arguably more so important in the mental than it is in the physical. As we know, the whole universe is mental. This is the first law of alchemy. Also observer. This was like a very important piece to it. These were like the words that were kind of coming up to me as that were bubbling up on the surface. This is not to say that this aren't qualities that a woman can't have. I'm saying these are qualities of like masculinity. And as you know, we have masculine and feminine within us, whether man or woman.
Right.
It just so happens that men tend to be more masculine, but women tend to be more feminine. But we've seen examples of both.
Well, you have the hard wiring to be more. So that's very cool. The virile. I didn't know that had some alluded to like observing and some exploring, because like talking about enlightened masculinity, you know, masculinity is in the Eastern traditions the observer, and femininity is the chaos, the things that are born. They go through cyclic existence. Everything that goes through cyclic existence is the feminine, and the observation of that is the masculine. So, and everywhere that there's cyclic existence, there's observation of it. And everywhere there's observation, there's cyclic existence. Because without the cyclic existence, there's the observer doesn't exist. There's nothing to observe. So it's mute. It's not. It doesn't. There's nothing to observe. Then there's no observer. So everywhere there's masculine, there's the feminine. Everywhere there's the feminine, there's the masculine. And enlightenment is seeing reality as it is. So understanding the nature of the observer and of the cyclic existence.
Britney Spears says this well. There's two kind of people in the world: those who can entertain and those who observe. And that's the whole masculine feminine dynamic. I don't remember what song it was, but that's in one of her songs.
Who said that?
Britney Spears.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You can entertain, and there's those that can observe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we start getting into. So I mean, we're both yogis, but yoga teachers. I actually have a private later, right after this, which is why I have to bounce a little quick, like around 12:40ish. Yeah. But the idea of, I mean, I'd like to think that we're men who recognize spirituality, and so is it important for us, or for men like this, to act from a place of awareness of their masculine to begin with? And I guess, what does that even mean?
Yeah, starting with what does that even mean? You know, being aware of what your masculine is would mean that you need to know what the feminine is also, because they're just equal and opposite. So if you're unaware of the feminine, like I was just talking with my girl, and she says, oh, and I brought up this yoga teacher. I was like flipping through Instagram and came up Kino McGregor. If you've ever heard of her, she's one of the more famous yogis. Mm-hmm. And I always had like mixed opinions about her, but I have learned some things from her videos. And one thing I admired was how much she appeared to value her appearance. And so she was big into fashion. She would always have her face on. She always had her hair looking good, her nails done. Like, she presented herself, even though she's not like the most attractive woman, but she presented herself in an attractive way, which makes me like her more. Like, you don't have to be the most attractive woman, but present yourself like, you got something hidden and worthwhile, and you want to attract the strongest person for it. And that sense of self-esteem that comes from that, I like that in a woman. And so she had this picture of her doing an upward dog position, no face on at all. I had to take a double take. She's like 15 years older. Like, I see the bags in your eyes, and like, it's just like ruined it for me. Like, it's like you were a magician and you showed me how to do the trick. I can never be entertained by that trick again, ever. As soon as I see my girlfriend without makeup, that image is in my head. And every time I see her with makeup, it looks fake. And so I say that, and I was just telling my girl, I show her the picture. I'm like, this is disgusting. Like, I want to unfollow Kino now. Like, I'm not going to. I'll give her one more chance, but if that happens again, I got to unfollow. Not that she cares. She has like 4 million followers. But I don't want that image in my head. And my girlfriend noticeably saw my, like, repulsion. Like, I almost vomited in my mouth. And she asked me, beautiful question. She's like, what would a guy do that would make a woman respond that way? And I said, 2 things came to mind. First thing was, he fails to protect his family. He doesn't step up to protect them when they're getting bullied. That would be repulsive. I think a woman would just like, what a weak man. Like, get him away from me. And the second thing would be, there's all sorts of things. But the second thing that came to mind was if his friends dog on him. His friends dog on him, and he gives like suggestions of like things to do, or his friends just ignore him, or just kind of mentally bully him, like just disregard, like they keep him around almost so they can just like kind of bully him. Like when you see a guy and his friends just absolutely disregard everything he says and don't listen to him, that's nauseating to me. Those are the ideas that I came up with. And so awareness of what is masculine means you must be aware of what's feminine. If it would be fine and fair enough to say those 2 points that I said that would repulse a woman, because the opposite is true, that would attract a woman. He always steps up to protect his family. Anytime his family is in danger, he's the first to step up. Nobody even has to ask him. And he arrives and he's ready to go. And the other one is his friends all listen to him. Like they just, as soon as he starts talking, like their ears perk up and they're like, what's he saying? And, so awareness of what is masculine would mean, because I would only care about those features in the sense of it attracts a woman. Like I would only care, like if it wasn't for attracting women, guys would be so weak. There would be no need to protect other people. There just wouldn't be, like there would be no tribes. There wouldn't need to be that. Men would just kind of dissolve and be by themselves. And, and you see this, men that give up on the feminine, they just are perfectly fine being alone. And I mean, they got warped up thoughts or whatever, because if you're unable to engage and interact with the female, there's a part of your masculinity that is
unexpressed. Yeah.
And it's unfulfilled. You could be great in all other areas of life, but if you can't interact with women in a comfortable way that's fulfilling to you, then you're missing a big piece of it, and nothing else is going to fill that. And it's the same way with women. Like women that think they got it all together, but they don't have it together with a man, they're missing a big part of what it is to be female. And their only misery is going to ensue from that.
That's really interesting, Chris, because I mean, for me,
go ahead.
This kind of what immediately comes up is like, well, you are a man or a woman, and I guess you can change that gender if you want to, but we're not going to go down that discussion.
It's a minority.
But the idea being that, like, in order to really fully self-express, and I think that's what we all seek in a lot of ways, is to be free, right? This is kind of one of the big tenets of living in America, but I guess just being a citizen of the world. I think one of the things that we seek is freedom. Freedom from the mind, freedom from, I think it's really freedom from the mind at the end of the day.
I think we have the idea of freedom from the mind because we're yogis. I don't know that most people think that way, but I agree.
Okay. Nonetheless, though, I mean, that freedom comes like with expression. The only way you can be free is by expressing whatever you want to. To me, that's what the definition of freedom is to self-express as much as possible without hesitation and without hesitation, I suppose. So in order to really attain that as a man in this world, or we need to be aware of like what are the ways of how does the masculine or the man in the world act, and how can we most align with that place that nature has set out for us, particularly in a society like we talked about at the beginning, where it's very much that conversation is changing and such. So it's returning back to those values and ideas. I think that's really important, particularly for men on the spiritual path such as ourselves, because we're engaged, like as we talked about, we're surrounded by women in these yoga classes and in that community. And when there needs to be a balance, like, so we must be, and the way I view it is we must be very strong in the masculinity to be dealing with so much femininity within that room, if that makes sense. In all places there needs to be a balance, and if they're carrying a lot of feminine energy, we need to be carrying a lot of masculine energy to balance that. It's the idea of the yin and the yang, which means quite a bit to me. But I think everywhere we go is balanced. It depends on the individuals to kind of take on the different roles to balance it, though.
Yeah, and some people I know, because for so long in my life, even if I was even somewhat aware of masculine and feminine, that there wasn't a calibration within me. I wasn't changing myself to become more masculine, more feminine. Like I didn't see that dial inside of me that I could dial it up or dial it down. And, when we talk about like what nature set out for us, like nature set out for you to fail unless you're a champion. Like that's nature. Nature is not everyone is equal. Nature is not everyone wins. Nature is most people lose, a few win, and we're all born of the winners. We're only born of the winners. We're only born of the kings. Sure, you go some peasants for the last 10 or 20 generations, but you go back for most of human history, and it was the tribal leaders made it with everyone, and we're all born from that. And that's it. So, the rest of that, as far as like, balancing and holding to the masculine, you know, enlightenment and having awareness of really, I'm really getting on this phrase. I say it a lot. I talk about it with Yuri a lot, and I don't, who's my other co-host for Spiritual Growth Podcast, that it's the animal body. The animal body is drawing you into a bunch of arguments, a bunch of yes and no's, a bunch of violence, really. That's what an argument is. And to be so unaffected and just like, like, fuck this animal body. Like, I treat my body well. I eat well. I exercise well. But this fucking shit robot gets stimulated so easily by things that I don't want it to be. A beautiful woman walks in front of me. Why do my eyes have to jerk over there? Like, come on, eyeballs. What, am I not in control over here? Like, I'm so in control of my language and my posture and my breathing. Like, I can't control my eyeballs. And then it becomes a thing where I can control it, but then there's like a residue of tension where I had to force myself not to. And then okay, let's imbue a little bit of enlightenment over there so I can look and appreciate beauty, because there's something that nature set out for us. One of the main points of yoga is to see the beauty in all things. Everything, there's a beauty in intelligence, even the most disgusting things, but definitely the beautiful things. But if you get attached to the beauty, that's the body, the animal body gets stuck to it, like the attraction, the electrons, or whatever you want to call it, the prana. This polarity is pulling me towards it like a magnet. And to that degree that happens, I'm unaware. Like, I'm unaware that my body is moving in unconscious ways. I'm unaware that sometimes I'll be scratching my neck around a woman that I'm attracted to. Like, bring a little awareness to it. Like, hey, that's a signal. Like, I'm unaware that, my body is facing her in a certain way, and this is communicating in nature. This is communicating something. Okay, so bring a little enlightenment to the situation, go a little third person on it, and orient your body with some intelligence. And it's going to be a constant balance of like, I'm trying too hard to do something, like I'm thinking about it, I'm not being organic or genuine or this or that. And it's like, listen, you're organic and genuine, your sense of organic and genuine is not as organic and genuine as you think. It's just a tape recorder. You've just been coded to do that. And you think it's organic and genuine because you don't want to try. You don't want to try to change it. And if you try to change it, people are going to dog on you because they want you to stay where you are in life, because that's how they measure where they are in life, is compared to you. As soon as you start moving up, they feel less, which is true. You pass them, they go from second to third. You pass them, they're in the lead, they go from first to second. People don't like that. It doesn't feel good. So don't let them stop you. Don't care about the opinions of other people so much unless you care about them. Care about the opinions of people you care about to the degree that they're qualified on that subject. And to the degree they're not qualified, then some empathy or whatever. So back on task, right? This is what I ask you to keep me on task. Anyway, I forgot what I was talking about, but I think that's kind of a perspective on it. Like, just be aware of what your animal body is doing. Like, this isn't you. It's not your body. Like, why is your face tensing? Or why did you say that thing? Why did you blurt that one thing out? Why is your foot a certain way?
No, I think it's like you mentioned, it is really important in the sense of, that's for me one of the reasons why I identify with the archetype of the pharaoh, is because it's like part God, part human, part leader, so close to humanity and a human, like a demigod in a lot of ways, but also a god, and so it forces me to act from that place of awareness, or it reminds me that that's where we come from. Perhaps we start closing up because it's right around 12:40 now. I've got about 55 minutes or so. So we close up. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the products that you've been offering. Particularly, I have a real deep interest, and I think later today I'm going to pick up the communication product that you just put out recently. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and what you've been up to, and we can close it from there.
Yeah. Well, the thing I just released is called Flavor of Language. And it's an old lecture, but I added 2 new lectures to it. So about 2.5 hours. It goes into some phonetics, some word magic, some tidbits about enunciation and how your emotions are accompanied by self-talk always. Every time you feel something, you're saying something to yourself. And then it goes into, basically just how to articulate your mouth. And so it's very speech-oriented, how to talk in a way that clarifies your emotions. For example, if you're not clarifying your consonants at the ends of words, then your mind is unclear also. So it's hard for me to do it bad now, but if I was like talking and I wasn't really saying the consonants at the end of my word, it's hard to do. It's hard for me to go backwards in it. But if I'm not enunciating consonants at the ends of my words, then my mind is trailing off also. You know this because when you start to apply consonants at the ends of your words, your mind will cut it. It will cut the thread. Consonants cut the emotion because the vowel is the emotion. And that's an emotion. That's a vowel. And versus it just cuts it right there. And then once you get some of the basics of phonetics right there, which, I mean, you could pick up a book on phonetics. So I start going to like the word magic of it, especially how your name, like Akash, Akash, is the sound code of your name. And so 10,000 times you've heard your name over your life and you've responded to it. And so the sound code of your name has imprinted your identity. And it's imprinted the identities of people around you who have also called you Akash because you have to make a facial expression when you say a sound. And so there's an emotion that's coded with that facial expression. So you can have a very pleasant sounding name that accompanies very pleasant emotions, or you can have some, Gertrude or something that's like some weird like name and it gives you a weird personality because 10,000 times you've said your own name and had to make a weird facial expression to do it, which accompanies a weird emotion. And so a weird emotion is your identity. And it goes into the basics of that. And then on the final lecture, I break down some inception concepts, which is a program that Arash Dibazar came out with. It was a $1,000 program. And then I add some other things, basically like speech patterns, imagination patterns. And I basically go into how your emotions are on repeat because your self-talk is on repeat. That you're talking to yourself in loops and it's causing your emotions to recur in loops. And to get out of the looping statements requires you engage this part of the mind called imagination to get somewhere where you're unfamiliar because your familiarity is giving you familiar emotions over and over and over and over and over. So get to a new unfamiliar place by using some of these speech patterns that I give in Flavor of Language. And that's at ninthlim.com. I'll put the link in the bio or the description for this. And yeah, I think everybody on earth should listen to it. I'm very proud of what I put
together. Awesome. I'm excited about this, Chris. I'm looking forward to next week. Potentially we do something tomorrow. We'll reach out and figure that out.
That'd be cool to pick this up again.
Cool. Well, I think that's a wrap. This is awesome and looking forward to tomorrow then.
Awesome. Well, kill it with your private and really imbue some masculine enlightenment. I'm sure they need it. And I'll see you tomorrow, Akash. Namaste.
Thank you, brother. Namaste.